Welcome to Climate Quickies, bite-sized nuggets of climate goodness from our TEDxLondon experts in under 5 minutes.
In this week's Climate Quickie, we hear from Xavier Cortada, an eco-artist empowering people to take climate action through community art projects. When Xavier learned of the threat that rising sea levels posed to his coastal hometown of Miami, Florida, he founded a movement around creating visual elevation markers to highlight the risk of flood damage. The collaborative art project quickly mobilized action and some controversy. Let's head over to Xavier to hear more. And remember, stay curious.
Hello, my name is Xavier Cortada, and I am an artist, a socially engaged artist, and I'm so excited to be with you here on this podcast. So eco-art or ecological art is a socially engaged form of art making. So it's not just about making a painting, but it's really about engaging others to paint a better world. So as an artist, I use art as a way of helping reframe the way people see themselves vis-a-vis community, vis-a-vis the natural world in the context of time. And I do that by creating these processes that pique curiosity, that make people do like a double take and try to figure out, what is this about? I am a son of Cuban refugees. They came to Miami in the 1960s. My dad was an artist, as was his brother. And they used art, painting specifically, as a way of helping explain the pain of the Cuban diaspora, being exiled from everything they ever knew. So from a very early age, I understood that art wasn't about making something pretty. Art was really about engaging, communicating. So there was always this desire in me to use art, but I eventually wound up being a lawyer and engaged in juvenile justice issues. I was a professor at the University of Miami, director of juvenile justice programs, and I was invited by the U.S. Embassy to go to South Africa at the end of apartheid. So there I was in Soweto, South Africa, at the Ipaleg Community Center. So we were speaking through a translator. And I decided to just start doing what I did naturally, what I did when I was doodling all over my law books at the University of Miami, is use art as a way of connecting, as a way of engaging those kids in Soweto, South Africa. And that became a transformative moment for me. It began an exploration where I started using art more in my life, and eventually it was more than a visual aid. It became the vehicle through which to engage communities. Sea level rise is one of the most consequential impacts of this warming climate. And every place where land touches water is vulnerable. People aren't aware of that vulnerability. So as an artist, I wanted to highlight that. And I created this project called the Underwater Homeowners Association. So what I did is I used an app that let homeowners figure out how many feet above sea level their property was. And then I asked them to paint that number that they saw on the app on a yard sign. Thousands of people participate across the community in putting yard signs in front of their house, showcasing how many feet above sea level that home stood. And then comparing it to what the storm surge of a present-day hurricane would do to that property. And the idea is if your neighbor from across the street sees a number 3 in your front yard, she's going to ask you, well, what's that number 3 doing there? And you're going to tell her, it means that my property is 3 feet above sea level, but so is yours. Which means you and I better understand what the consequences of a warming planet are so that we can begin to do something about it. We can begin to let our city officials know how to begin to adapt to it. And most importantly, so we as a community can begin to tell each other, this is real. Let's do something about our addiction to fossil fuels, and let's transform to a green, a clean economy. So those are the kind of conversations that the art I do elicit, and then gives those two neighbors the agency, the opportunity the platform to begin to do something about it, because now they've engaged each other, which means they can engage their other neighbors and eventually their neighborhood and community to really begin addressing the issue of climate at the local level. And if that happens simultaneously across communities, in the UK, in Taiwan, in the Philippines, in Nicaragua, and people begin to understand the consequences of what a warming planet looks like, then the sense of urgency will be felt at the places where elected officials make the kind of policies that regulate the corporate sector and invest in the public sector to really cohesively begin to tackle this crisis that we humans have created and brought upon ourselves. So art can transform life on this planet. Art can motivate us to act. Art can show us the way. Art can become the lens through which we see our world and begin to transform and make a better planet.
Thanks for listening to this quickie.
This episode was created by our superstar podcast team at TEDxLondon. Until next time,
Stay curious.